day 664 of this Trump administration, and there continues to be this avalanche of reports about the president's personal anger and bitterness. Following the midterms, a bad trip overseas, reports of new upheaval in the West Wing. Tonight, the Deputy National Security Advisor, Mira Ricardel, who is said to have repeatedly clashed with the First Lady's East Wing staff, is out of the West Wing. Officially, she's being reassigned. According to the White House, quote, Mira Ricardel will continue to support the president as she departs the White House to transition to a new role within the administration. That new role was not announced. As for the other administration officials said to be on her way out tonight, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen is still on the job. There was a Nielsen sighting today. She was alongside Secretary of Defense Mattis visiting troops at the U.S.-Mexico border today, guarding against that caravan. While all that was going on, the president was talking to the Daily Caller. Asked about Nielsen's future as a member of his cabinet, he said, quote, I'm looking at things. I haven't made a decision yet. I will be making a decision on Homeland shortly. I will be making changes on various things. Trump also spoke to the conservative website about his frustration over the Democrats flipping the House and the ongoing Florida recount. And we quote again, the Republicans don't win, and that's because of potentially illegal votes. When people get in line that have absolutely no right to vote and they go around in circles, sometimes they go to their car, put on a different hat, put on a different shirt, come in and vote again. He went on to say, if you buy a box of cereal, you have a voter ID. They try to shame everybody by calling them racist or calling them something, anything they can think of when you say you want voter ID. But voter ID is a very important thing. Now, if you don't recall having to produce ID to buy groceries, if you weren't alone, and if you're not familiar with people wearing disguises to your local polling place, you're not alone either. Soon after those comments were posted, White House reporters asked the president for facts to support his assertions.
Mr. President, you just said that people use disguises to cast illegal votes. Do you have any evidence of voter fraud like that? Do you have any evidence of people doing voter fraud? Why make that false claim without evidence?
Still no answer to the cereal question. Meanwhile, this man, the Mueller investigation, moving ahead on a number of fronts. Mueller's team appears to be focusing on whether longtime Trump advisor Roger Stone had contact with WikiLeaks and knew ahead of time about the release of those stolen Democratic emails during the campaign. The Wall Street Journal reporting the special counsel's office is now looking into possible witness intimidation by Stone and his former friend Randy Credico. Stone has claimed that Credico, this man, was a back channel to WikiLeaks. Credico denies that, and NBC News has exclusively obtained text messages from October 2016 between Stone and Credico in which they discuss WikiLeaks just 6 days before the release of John Podesta's emails. Stone, who has already said he expects to be indicted, was on Laura Ingram's radio show earlier today.
There is no evidence whatsoever of Russian collusion or WikiLeaks collaboration or any proof or evidence that I knew in advance the source or the content of allegedly stolen or allegedly hacked emails published by WikiLeaks. I never discussed John Podesta's emails in my tweets. The allegation that I somehow knew in advance about the theft of his emails is patently untrue.
Mueller's team is also continuing to get information from former Trump deputy campaign manager Rick Gates. In court today, prosecutors said they were not ready to sentence Gates because he's continuing to cooperate with ongoing investigations. And the man Mueller is now reporting to, Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker, today received a ruling from the Justice Department's own in-house Office of Legal Counsel, saying it looks good to them. His appointment is lawful and valid. A good many others disagree. They feel Whitaker has prejudged the Russia investigation and that his appointment in the first place is unconstitutional. Today, Arizona Republican Senator Jeff Flake tried to force a vote on a bill to protect Mueller's job, but was blocked by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Flake holds the deciding vote, as you may recall, on a narrowly divided Senate Judiciary Committee. He now says he won't vote to advance or confirm Trump administration judicial nominees unless a vote to protect Mueller is held.
Well, the president has said that he's not going to move on the special counsel, but that's not enough. When you have the attorney general fired and the oversight for the investigation moved to someone who has not received Senate confirmation, who has expressed open hostility to the Mueller investigation, then there's a problem.
So much to talk about as we bring in our leadoff panel on a Wednesday night. John Heilman, MSNBC national affairs analyst, also co-author of Game Change and Double Down, as well as co-host of The Circus on Showtime. Philip Rucker, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House bureau chief for The Washington Post, and Mimi Rocah, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, now a distinguished fellow in criminal justice at the Pace University School of Law. Welcome to you all, Mr. Rucker. I'd like to read you a quote from your newspaper tonight. We have such a stack of issues. Let's stack them back up and start at the start. The First Lady's decision to publicly advocate for the ouster of a senior member of her husband's staff shows a new willingness on her part to weigh in on White House operations and marks a change from earlier in the Trump administration when she repeatedly played down her role as advisor to the president. Rick Ardell's dismissal also serves as a rebuke of John Bolton, known for his sharp elbows and ability to navigate internal tensions, who refused for weeks to fire his hand-picked deputy and worked in the past day to protect her. May I add that Bolton is 10,000 miles away in Asia on a business trip. Yeah. Phil, have we overplayed the Hunger Games aspect of this East Wing, West Wing drama, or do we have it about right?
I think you have it about right, Brian. It's not just a Hunger Games drama, but she's the #2 national security official in the White House. And with Bolton overseas in Asia, she's functioning as the top national security official until today, this afternoon, when we learned that she would be leaving. Look, she's, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way in the West Wing because she has been John Bolton's enforcer. Bolton is famous through past administrations for being a bureaucratic fighter, for being able to manipulate the bureaucracy and amass power inside administrations. And Mira Reed Ardell has helped him do that in the White House. But it seems like the last straw was this run-in with the First Lady, Melania Trump, regarding the travel plans for her trip to Africa last month. Reed Ardell noticed as the planning was taking place that the flight manifest for the First Lady's flight to Africa did not include a seat for Reed Ardell or for any other National Security Council official, and that the National Security Council policy experts were told to fly commercially on their own to get to Africa and to meet up with the First Lady's traveling party on the ground, which she interpreted as a real slight. And that created a lot of bad blood between her and the First Lady's office. And then we saw that extraordinary statement yesterday where the First Lady's office said, look, we don't think she deserves the honor of serving in this White House.
Yeah, that'll probably do it. John, let's go to the next item in the snack with some personal news. I was at my favorite ShopRite around 3 p.m. on Sunday. Bought several ShopRite.
ShopRite. Oh, your favorite ShopRite. Okay, yes. Okay.
Bought several makes of cereal. Yeah. Sailed through checkout. Yeah. I now feel like I might have committed cereal fraud. I was not asked for, nor did I produce.
And when you say cereal fraud, are you talking about fraud related to cereal, or are you saying many forms of fraud in the same place?
Many brands of cereal.
Cereal fraud related to cereal.
What do you make of the president's comments on cereal purchases and on the wearing of a disguise to the polls?
Well, I mean, look, it's comical and absurdist and ridiculous and has no basis in reality. It's a surrealist kind of hyper weird
but it's our president,
fantasy.
John.
But it's, I know, I understand. But the president has made. I mean, look, there are various levels of gaudiness to the absurdities of the things that he says about voter fraud. But all of them are rooted in something that's fundamental. In some ways, making the allegation that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote because there were 3 million illegal votes cast in the 2016 election is no more or less absurd than the thing about the disguises in the grocery store. It just doesn't sound as kind of comical, but they're all equally absurd and equally insidious and equally baseless, and all equally driven by the same impulse, which is to cast doubt on the validity of the system so that when the system turns against him, if it does turn against him, when he loses an election or that he is standing for election, he will have laid the predicate down to say the system was rigged, somehow this was stolen from me. That is what it's all been about from the beginning in 2016 all the way through to now, is that moment he knows is coming when he's going to lose a vote and he's going to say, well, I've been telling you for the last 3 years that this whole system is rife with fraud. And now he's just making up kind of increasingly kind of, absurd versions of that.
And, Counselor, you get us, of course, to Roger Stone. This will make maybe the 15th conversation you and I have had about Roger Stone. Does this get us where you thought we were headed, especially this aspect that he may be affecting witnesses?
Right. So we have talked a lot about Stone. I think what's new here is, first of all, this idea that, the reporting that Mueller is looking at Stone for intimidating witnesses, because two things. One, that's an additional potential charge against Stone, but it also goes to this point that we've talked about before with Trump and others, consciousness of guilt. If Stone, which it seems from the reporting, is trying to get witnesses to adopt his version of the truth, to make their story match his, well, why? What is he hiding? And, he is very good at going on TV and tweeting and making videos of him saying, I didn't know anything. And he keeps changing his story, though. And every time something comes out in the reporting, he discovers a new batch of texts that show that he really didn't know anything in advance. Look, we can't parse all the facts because we don't have all the evidence that Mueller does. But it is very clear that there are way too many coincidences here that don't add up, that Stone is going to have to answer for at some point, I think, and we'll just have to see what form that takes.
I'll tell you one fact we can parse. Roger Stone lies all the time.
Yes.
He's been a pathological serial liar.
Have interviewed him
through
many
times throughout his entire career, though. Going back now 40 years in politics, Roger Stone lies about everything. And so to the point, that's the one North Star, home truth about Roger Stone. And so I actually am kind of tired of this story. I'm to the point where it's like he's going to get indicted, and then we're going to find out what the whole evidence tells us. But all of his assertions now are utterly worthless and completely in keeping with the fact that he lies about everything all the time.
And additional point on that, I think because we all say, why isn't he indicted yet? It makes me think there is more coming, and it's not just going to be about his lies, and it might not just be Stone, right? That we think there's going to be a couple of people involved who get indicted.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.